Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 13th episode of Tides of Lore. My name is Robert Silva. I am one half of your host team, joined as always by my good friend Tim. How you doing today, Tim?
I'm good, bro. Did a really big achievement. At least I consider it big last night. Got to 1800 in retail PvP before the next season, so really fun. Got the set, got the mount. Beat Zekfir this week, which is, you remember who that is, right?
Oh, I remember.
He's that delve boss that you have to solo to get the mount. Did that, made a video on that. Shout out Troy TV, my channel. But yeah, man, been playing retail. I don't know, I'm just raid logging on Classic, so I got a little bored, unfortunately.
I mean, that is the blight of Classic, truly. Once you reach the end game, once you've raided, unless you're really dedicated to Battlegrounds or really dedicated to grinding out every piece of BIS gear, then it's not much left to do. Unless you're looking to start a new character, maybe run some hardcore or something.
Yeah, and I just played hardcore so much, and retail is actually pretty fun. I don't know if you see next patch, it's a new mount system. So it's a race car, and it goes like ridiculous speeds. Think of dragon flying, but no flying. You're on the ground, and you're just going like, I don't know, hundreds of percent. So that looks pretty fun. So I'm excited to try that out. Yeah, that's what I've been up to. What about you, big dog? What have you been up to?
I haven't been doing too much. We've been working on the social medias like we mentioned last week. A lot of our content over on TikTok as well as some other platforms have been doing really well. So thank you guys for that. I mean, even just to mention our channel, it was over this last week the biggest growth in channel that we've ever had. We went from 97 at the start of last week's episode, subscribers that is, up to 123 as we currently sit now. So your guys' support is going crazy, and we really do appreciate that. So thank you.
Let's go.
Oh,
and if you guys found us through like TikTok or what have you, Instagram, let us know. I'm curious, like, where you guys found us from.
Outside of that, I was watching the Super Bowl with you guys on Sunday. I was rooting for my Birds, which went great and was an amazing time for me as an Eagles fan, as well as getting to see my boy Kendrick up there on stage, who, I've rewatched it like 3 times already. I love that performance.
It was a good time all around, whether it be the halftime performance or the Chiefs getting wrecked. Even me, as not a sports or football fan, I had a good time. I had a good time with you guys, just chilling. I was PvPing, just watching.
Yeah, but that's all that's really been going on with me. Last episode, we spoke about the origins of Azeroth, the Titans and the Titan Keepers, as well as the origins of the Earthen and the Mechanomes, and even some of the Vrykul. What do you remember about that last episode, Tim?
It was a very broad episode. We talked a lot about a lot of very different important things, like at first the light versus the void and how that like kind of forms, or the overarching like cosmos story, I should say. You have that, but you also have the elementals, right, who were first on Azeroth, and how they were kind of quelled, I guess, by the Void Lords. And then also like how people formed. So like, for instance, the dwarves, how they were like Titan constructs, were like rock figures, and they got the curse of flesh. Same with us, and like the humans in the Vrykul. And then we talked about how like those races, after they transform with the curse of flesh, how they like really formed in Azeroth. We focused mainly, I'll say, on like the dwarves and Blackrock depths, I'll say. But that's about what I remember.
Yeah, we've been trying to go over some of the lore for the actual raids that you'd be doing if you're playing Classic alongside with us. So we talked a bit about the Molten Core, as well as some of the Dark Iron story with Dagran Tharson, as well as Moira Bronzebeard. And then Moira and stuff like that will come back into play in a bit later. But yeah, that is mostly what we discussed.
It was a fun episode.
I think so too. And this one's going to be fun as well. But moving into some of the comments that we got on the last set of videos, we do have a few responses to some of the stuff we talked about. First things first, I'm going to throw up JC Chaos 000X once again, because he's our most loyal commenter, to be honest. Him and Away Fan. But he said, in response to Sylvanas being interested in Nathanos, when reading the Sylvanas book, I felt the story was trying to spin that Sylvanas viewed vanity as just the commonplace thing, Everyone did it. It was the expectation. It was no stranger than drinking water. Nathanos' ugliness was a novelty to Sylvanas. She was presented traditionally attractive humans. Nathanos stood out. His brash nature also stood out. Where others had sticks up their butts, Nathanos took those sticks and beat people over the head with it. When it came to Varisa loving Ronan, it was because Ronan challenged her and encouraged her to be better. And then there's Turalyon, which IMO I think is the weirdest relationship. Like, they love each other, but the start of it had some bumps along the road, and it just feels like they would have been better apart. But that's also what the Void wants, so they got to keep them together.
Also, like, the Void is the direct opposite of everything Turalyon, like, believes in. So, like, for him to still be with her is, it's kind of interesting.
I do agree. I went into a bit of a discussion with him as well, just talking about how I actually think that the comment on Sylvanas is a really good point, because even like when you do read the novel, it does feel like even more than Varisa or even more than Illyria, if anyone would have been able to set Sylvanas on like the straight and narrow path from what she will eventually go on to do, it was probably Nathanos more than anyone else.
He seems pretty whipped, though. I don't know. He'll do anything she says, and he'll do terrible crimes now for her.
And I did mention, I was like, if he had wanted to do that, which obviously he didn't. And he was more like, yeah, sure, man, whatever.
Yeah, so. Let's do genocide. Like,
oh boy, here I go genociding again.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, that's some of the stuff that we discussed there. We also did have Brady Sword 11 saying, "This is my favorite series to listen to currently. Such a chill content to listen to." And just a real nice heartfelt message from him. And we do appreciate those. They really do help us to continue feeling the desire to record these every week and put as much effort as we have been while continuing to expand our content for you guys.
I know he just puts it on while he's leveling, and he was like, dude, I want to wait till I do Blackrock Depths until I play the Blackrock Depths episode. He wanted to do them both at the same time. I thought that was pretty cool.
Luckily for him, we are going to kind of take a small break from Blackrock. I had hoped to do it a bit more, but this Varian story that we're going to go into today is really beefy, but it does talk about, some of the Black Dragon stuff as well as Nyxia, and that's going to all tie together along with that.
Also, like, to do the Nyxia attunement, you do a lot of what we're talking about in Blackrock Depths. Like, I think about Prison Break, where you literally have to break a guy out of prison, and a lot of what you do in that, it is actually related to what the story we're about to talk about, though it's different. I find it kind of interesting.
Yep. And we'll see how long this episode goes on for. This might be our very first two-parter, because this comic run that Varian's story is told in is covered under like 14 to 19 issues of comic books. So we may not quite get to that, but yeah, he even goes into Blackrock Depths and he does the Prison Break stuff, and we see a bunch of these Blackrock Depths bosses and stuff like that as he's doing it, as well as obviously, the hints of the Black Dragons. But just to move on to our final comment, this time actually over on TikTok, we do have the Fat Matt saying, "Fantastic timing. I'm playing Hardcore Classic right now." And that's respectable. I did ask him for a level and class check, and I did not get a response, but I'm sure that
he's too dedicated.
Yeah, I was going to say
he's going hard right now.
Got his head to the grindstone right now, so.
Or he died. I
level checked, and he's like, level 5 warrior. But yeah, so with that being the case, like I said, we're going to move into today's story of Varian Wrynn, as well as his story that leads up to the events of Classic World of Warcraft and into Classic World of Warcraft. So I hope you guys are excited for that today. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Tides of Lore on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps the channel and ensures you won't miss a moment of this adventure. Now let's get started. Starting off with, like I said, Varian Wrynn, we do have the rebuilding of Stormwind. Like we did mention back in the Arthas episode, Varian Wrynn, along with Anduin Lothar, would head to Lordaeron to seek refuge while the events of the Second War took place after the events of the First War completely leave Stormwind destroyed. So with that being done, the orcs are defeated, imprisoned, and the Dark Portal has now been closed. Kinda, sorta continues to open sometimes. But the main focus is that we do have Varian Wrynn. Basically, as soon as the Second War ends, so like 2 years after the Second War ends, they begin to rebuild Stormwind with the help of the King Menethil, as well as other people like Hansa's Fall, like we spoke about in the last episode. And just to get into a bit more of that story, we have Varian being an 18-year-old who ascends to the throne as actually rightfully crowned as King of Stormwind during this time period. And about 10 to 12 years after the Dark Portal, the city is fully rebuilt. But unfortunately, there is a bit of a conflict because the main people that they called upon to rebuild the actual city of Stormwind was a group known as the Stonemasons Guild. And the Stonemasons Guild are led by a man named Edwin Van Cleef. And they're really good at what they do. They build Stormwind up to be better than it ever was. But unfortunately, like most kingdoms, they still have nobles, and nobles have a tendency to still be greedy. So with the city being rebuilt, they do also kind of expand their military out into the Elwyn Forest, which is right outside of Stormwind, as well as further south towards the Stranglethorn Vale, where we didn't talk too much about, but that's kind of where the Gurubashi trolls reside. If you do remember, we briefly talked about them during episode 3 of the Horde versus Alliance episode. During this time, Varian, this is about a 4-year period, Varian will eventually take a wife, and he will marry to a woman named Tiffin. And before too long, about by the time Varian is 25 years old, he will have his first son, Anduin Wrynn, who we did also briefly mention back in the Arthas episode, because he is a very, very small little tot during the time that Arthas is made a paladin. But there is problems, because Varian, frequently, now being the King of Stormwind, will be leaving the actual capital city to go do diplomatic missions with the other members of the Alliance, because there are issues where the Alliance is kind of crumbling because of things like Quel'Thalas leaving the group. One of the kingdoms, called Gilneas, will go into this isolationist mentality where they're like, fuck everyone else, and they don't really want to work with the Alliance anymore, as well as one of the other kingdoms, kind of the people that originated magic in humans, of Stromgarde. They also will pull out of this. And there is his personal vendetta against the woman who assassinated his father, so he is constantly seeking her, Garona Half-Orcan. While Varian is away from Stormwind, there is the House of Nobles, who he basically leaves watching over the bureaucracy of Stormwind. And like I mentioned, they are kind of greedy. They are being manipulated by, and I'm just going to make this super plain because otherwise it does get kind of confusing. They are being manipulated by a noble that is pretending to be a human, but is in fact the Black Dragon Onyxia.
So what's her name again?
She goes by the name of Katrana Prestor.
Or Katrina?
It's Catarina, and
Is it?
R-A-N-A.
I don't think
so. It's just A. So I think it's Katrana.
It's Katrina.
Nope.
Interesting.
I actually misspelled it in the notes, but it gets corrected down in the bottom. So.
Oh, you're right. Katrana Prestor.
Yep.
I thought it was Katrina.
I actually, reading the comments up until the very last second when I started typing out the names, I was like, this isn't Katrina.
I want to talk about her a little bit. So you talked about how Stormwind was kind of getting weaker, right?
I wouldn't say weaker. I would just say that they are becoming more corrupt. They're becoming greedy, and they are being magically manipulated because Onyxia, being a black dragon, is very magically powerful.
I was watching some video, and I remember it speaking about how Katrana actually was making Stormwind like heavily in debt because she was sending like military units to where they shouldn't go, just basically wasting money. She was sending them to like Stranglethorn Vale instead of like the Searing Gorge, where we probably should be defending instead of STV. But she was like diverting these troops and just draining the money of Stormwind and putting them, I think, heavily into debt.
Yep, super heavily into debt. And that is what really sets off one of these major problems in, I guess, the first major problem of this rebuilt Stormwind. And that is that she is basically manipulating both the House of Nobles as well as the Stonemasons Guild, basically, because building up all of this debt, they do not have enough money to pay the stonemasons for how much effort and work they put in to rebuild Stormwind. And she kind of manipulates them, saying, like, you guys deserve so much more money than they even tried to offer you. Like, even if they had paid you, you deserve more than that. So they're like, yeah, we do deserve more than that. And then she'll go to the nobles and be like, can you believe these stonemasons and how greedy they are? They didn't deserve, like, this is shoddy work. They don't even deserve to be paid. So she begins to sow a divide between these two factions. And Varian does try and negotiate a deal between them, but it does seem like it is a losing battle because, like I said, she is a powerful mage and she seems to have the ability to, like, mind control people, basically. So no matter what Varian tries to do, a conflict breaks out. And it really just leads up to a major event where the stonemasons riot through the streets of Stormwind. And as they are burning city and basically like, fuck the king, fuck the nobles, fuck everybody, there's Varian and his wife who are looking down at them either from a balcony or something when a massive rock comes flying and hits his wife Tiffin in the head, killing her immediately. And
just like that?
Just like that. It is literally a single panel. And
that might be the easiest kill in Warcraft history.
How much XP do you think she was worth?
Not much if it just takes one rock.
Yeah. So she dies. And this sends Varian into a shattering depression. Something that Onyxia even further plays on. Because this depression lasts for 10 years. And with that being the case, the only thing that really gets him to want to do anything is hanging out with his son, Anduin, as he grows into a young boy. But the Kingdom of Stormwind doesn't really get any better, and it's more like it's kind of just being left in the hands of Katrana. And that, well, fucks with the stability even more.
That's a lot of time she has to do whatever she wants.
Mm-hmm. And after that time, well, I guess like immediately after the riots, the Stonemasons Guild are like, oh, fuck. Because they know Varian's kind of a badass and that he's kind of not the most forgiving person. So they're like, we've got to get out of Stormwind. And they flee Stormwind. Him, Edwin, and all of his little lackeys go and flee to an area real nearby Stormwind called Westfall. And this is actually where they will, over those 10 years, turn from just angry stonemasons into the rebel bandit group known as the Defias Brotherhood.
And this is being led by... what's his name again?
Edwin Van Cleef, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the last boss in Dead Mines.
Yep.
Okay.
And that is even the reason that we go into Dead Mines, is because they're like, we need to avenge, well, obviously, the Defias get up to some more shit in Elwyn Forest, as well as Westfall, so it's kind of threatening the kingdom even more, but the real whole reason that you're supposed to go collect the head of Edwin in the Dead Mines is because of what he eventually led up to with Tiffin.
So they were mainly humans that left. I mean, when you go into Dead Mines, I remember trolls, ogres. Like, do they just take anyone?
Yeah, so over those 10 years, it stops, like I said, stops just being the stonemasons that are humans of Stormwind, but then goes on to being the, different races.
In classic Dead Mines, I only actually remember ogres.
Goblins as well. And the goblins tend to have
goblins.
A relationship with the ogres, so that does make sense. Following the rise of the Defias Brotherhood, you have this kind of takes place over this time span that the Third War happens. So Lordaeron is destroyed, the Legion is defeated at Mount Highjall, and the Arthas goes to the Frozen Throne and is crowned as the Lich King and unites with that. But during this time, Varian is still just in like a dark fog where he doesn't really want to do anything. And surprisingly, Katrana manages to let her magic on him slip a little bit, and he actually does begin to break free a little. And he looks over at his son, and he basically decides, he's like, I need to build a better Stormwind. I need to build a better world for Anduin and the people of Stormwind than I have been doing. So he kind of snaps out of it. But obviously that goes against Katrana's plans. So following one of these times where he spoke with his son, Anduin tells him, he's like, you should go talk with Jaina Proudmoore over in Theramore, because she's got like her own little human faction set up over on the other continent, and they're actually peaceful with the Horde and the Orcs. And I think that we could all be peaceful with each other, and it doesn't need to be, how it has been as of late. So he, for his son, is like, I hate orcs, son, but I will do this for you because I care about you. So he begins to plan a trip across the sea where he will go visit with Jaina Proudmoore on a diplomacy mission. And it doesn't really say who, it just says there's a spy in Stormwind who tells the Defias Brotherhood about this plan, but it does seem like it was probably Katrana, right?
I mean, it makes sense. It seems like she plays both sides pretty well.
Yeah, so on his way to doing this, he is drugged and kidnapped by the Defias Brotherhood. And they hide amongst his repertoire of soldiers that he's taking with him. And during this time, he is abducted and taken to a place called Alkaz Island, which is just off the coast of Theramore. And you can actually go here in Classic and find Varian before a certain patch hits, and it's like the Lost King of Stormwind down in a basement. Eventually he is removed, and then he's replaced with a goblin guy and a Naga guy, but we'll get into some of that stuff.
What is the first X-Pack? He in TBC is Varian in Stormwind again?
I believe so. I believe he is. I know that he is obviously definitely in Wrath of the Lich King, but it seems like he is in Stormwind by TBC.
Okay.
So he is kidnapped and taken there, and that is where Onyxia performs a dark ritual where she basically has this plan to split him into two beings and turn him into essentially one half that is Varian's strength and honor and will to fight, and the other half that is his kind of nobility. And just to make this super simple, we're going to refer to the honor and strength half as the true king, and we're kind of going to label the other half as the imposter king, the doppelganger, something like that, right? And
isn't it a strong and a weak version, basically?
Kind of. It's not...
She keeps the weak version because it's easier to manipulate, and the strong version she tries to hide away.
Exactly. Well, she actually intends to kill the strong version, but as she's doing this ritual, the island is set upon by Naga, and the Naga are like, "Get off our lands!" And then she's like, "You dare challenge the daughter of death?" And they fight, and in this chaos, both of the Varians manage to break free. And she had fully intended to kill the strong version, but things don't go to plan because during this chaos, the weaker one stumbles off of a cliff face, and as he's holding on to one of the roots that leads into the ocean, the Naga grab him and dive into the ocean and take him away. And the strong one is still staying there trying to fight. Onyxia is like, "Oh, I can still fry you at the very least," and she shoots dragon's breath at him, but just in time he grabs onto one of these other people, one of these Defias that was working with her, and he uses his body as a human shield. So in this dragon's flame, they can't really see what's going on, and then he lays underneath this smoldering corpse, and Onyxia is like, "Got his ass. All right, I'm gonna head out." And she flies off to go do what she can to continue to manipulate Stormwind, as well as hopefully locate the weaker version of Varian. And at this time, the Naga are like, "That guy's not dead." So they, draw weapons, start to cast spells, and try and fight with the other Varian. And he just kind of looks at the cliff face and is like, "Yeah, I can make that jump." And he just dives into the water. And the Naga don't chase him because they're like, "Well, he just killed himself. What an idiot."
Doesn't he knock himself out too? Unconscious?
Yeah, as he hits the water, he goes unconscious until he washes up on the shore of Durotar. And on Durotar, he is awoken by a Crocolus trying to eat him. And he is actually spotted by one of these shaman of the Horde by the name of Rhaegar Earthfury, who actually still is alive in modern WoW. He's still kind of a ambassador for Thrall. But he sees him, and they're just kind of standing there watching him as he's fighting with this Crocolus. And they're like, "I'll give you 40 silver if he survives." And he's like, "You know what? Make it 80. They're basically betting to see if Varian will die. And Varian is just doing all he can to fight off this Crocolus with a stick. And just as it looks like it's about to dive on him, Rhaegar frost shocks it or something. But he's like, actually, that didn't even matter, as he realizes that with this broken stick, he was using the Crocolus leap at him to impale it through the heart. So he's like, wow, he would have got that anyway. You know, I just recently lost a gladiator. He is a man that basically runs a team for these gladiator pits that goes on kind of all across Kalimdor. And he's like, you look like you can fight. I think I'll take you. So
what if, I know Thrall was a gladiator. What if there was a Thrall versus Varian fight back in the day when they were young? That would have been cool.
I agree. And I think that it would have been a really cool story. And their stories actually do draw a lot of parallels. I think that is kind of the purpose of this storyline. But basically, he is captured by Rhaegar, and he is thrown into some change and taken to go be trained for a group of gladiator fights that are led by a group called the Crimson Ring. And he's like, yeah, we got some team fights. Like, my main champion died a few weeks back due to poisoning, and you're going to be the replacement because we're doing some team fights. So as he's thrown in this cage, he is imprisoned alongside 2 other people, a night elf druid by the name of Brawl Bearmantle, as well as a blood elf rogue by the name of Valera Sanguinar. And these are actually both huge characters. Brawl will have a really major storyline around Cataclysm, along with Malfurion Stormrage and stuff like that, as well as Valera. She doesn't have as big of a story. This story that we do have with her is pretty sizable during these comics, but she is still iconic in my opinion because she is actually the original Hearthstone rogue.
Real quick, so Varian, he lost his memory because he got knocked unconscious, correct?
Oh yeah, that is something that I did forget to mention. When he wakes up on the shores of Durotar, he does not have any memory of who he was or anything like that. It seems like he has no memories, but he still kind of innately remembers his combat abilities.
So I don't expect him to know any of these people, but wouldn't the night elf, what was his name? Brawl,
yep.
Wouldn't he recognize Varian? Aren't the night elves part of the alliance right now?
It seems like
wouldn't he know the alliance king?
It seems like he should, but at the and it gets way crazier because down in this storyline, they'll meet up with Toronto Whisperwind as well as a bunch of other people from the alliance.
And you'd think they would know Varian.
And they're like,
oh, hey, you.
Nope, apparently not. No one seems to recognize him.
I just knew him in notes. There was no television back then.
I guess it could be attributed to that King Taranis was the one that actually led the alliance for most of it until the destruction of Lordaeron. But then by the time that Lordaeron was destroyed and the Stormwind became kind of the most powerful faction that still exists, he was so depressed that he didn't really go out or do anything, right?
Yeah, I don't know. It's still been like 10 years since that point, right?
Yeah.
You would think in a decade they would see or know what the king looks like.
Yep, I do agree, but we're going to suspend our disbelief a little bit. Because, yeah, that is something that I did come into. I even Googled it. I'm like, why the fuck doesn't anyone recognize Varian in this comic?
That's what I'm just trying to piece it together. Like, we're talking about it. In the back of my head, I'm like, wait, what? I understand Varian doesn't know what they look like because he lost his memory. But these guys should know him.
So, Rhaegar takes his new gladiators to Orgrimmar to train for this upcoming event that is being held by the Crimson Ring and Dire Maul. And he goes to the Valley of Honor, where you have the fighting pits and stuff like that. Or you used to at least have the fighting pits before they removed them from retail. And Varian is just kind of chilling out. You see that they are sparring against these other groups when one of these other goblins shows up and is like, your team's ass. Look at that human. He doesn't even want to fight. And then they kind of gang up on Brawl and Valera and start beating their ass. And then Varian's like, enough. And he just cuts the arms off of some of these dudes and fucking murders him. I should mention, Varian basically turns into what Arthas was during these stories, because Varian one-shots basically everything through this storyline. And it does make it feel really cool, because it gives you an idea of just how badass Varian was. But we'll get into more of that story. So Varian is then taken to the Orgrimmar Armory to select weapons for when they head out to face their gladiatorial combat at Dire Maul. And he actually comes across a belt that is gold metal and basically in the shape of a roaring lion's head. And this is the first time he'll get one of his memories back. He'll remember being a young boy standing on a ship as Stormwind burns behind him. and he sees a tall, silver-haired figure wearing this belt. And this is actually Anduin Lothar's belt from when he died at Blackrock Mountain.
That's cool.
So this is the first time he ever gets some of his memories back, but then he just kind of snaps back to who he was, and they choose weapons. They are then taken to Dire Maul to fight. Just to give you a clear idea, Dire Maul is this old Night Elven city from before the War of the Ancients, and at this point it is just ruins, and it is in the south side of Kalimdor in an area called Feralis, but it is been overtaken by ogres, and this is who live here and run these fighting pits for the most part.
Oh, so it's like the Dire Maul we know in Classic.
Yeah, this event would probably be like the year before Classic, if not leading into Classic itself. Yeah. So they go, and they are kind of laughed at by some of these other people because Rhaegar's previous champion was an orc, and he looked super buff, and he looked super strong, so nobody really gives their team a chance. But during these first little trials, they have Brawl and Valeera facing down some of these simpler fights. Brawl crushes a centaur, and Valeera fights a fucking Quillbore, which I'm like, a Quillbore? Really? The level 6 dudes that we face in Duro, that's who she had to fight? Okay.
There's some hard ones in RFD and RFK.
That is a fair point, I guess. That is a fair point. And Varian fights a troll, and the troll's like, I'm gonna kill you easy, and Varian just kind of throws one of these 2 swords that he has at him, and it goes straight through his throat in one swing.
Wow.
Yeah, he stomps. And before too long, they are in the championship round of this gladiatorial combat in the Dire Maul arena. And this time it's going to be all 3 of them fighting against the previous champions, which is a trio of massive ogres. And it's a bit of a fight. Brawl, who I mentioned is actually a druid, turns into one of his bear forms, and he mauls one of them pretty good. But Valeera she goes on to do cooler stuff, but right now she kind of just gets slapped around a lot. And it is...
Is she a rogue? What is she?
She is a rogue, but it is also stated that she, even for a blood elf, is super young. They call her a child for a lot of this. And she's like, I'm not a child. I just don't age as fast as you guys. You don't understand. But it still does seem like she's kind of what would essentially be like a young teen of the blood elves.
But just doesn't have as much strength as like a full-grown blood elf. Like they might be 100 years old, but still not fully grown.
Exactly, yeah. So the 2 of them kind of get taken out. At the very least, Brawl is crushed underneath one of the ogres and can't move. So while he's trying to heal himself and Valeera is kind of looking out for him, Varian's like, stand back. I got this. And he decapitates one of the other ogres pretty much immediately, crushing them. And then he faces down the other one and just, like I said, he smokes everybody in this series. So as he is just going off as a whirlwind of steel and blood, the champions fall. And that is when one of the trolls in the crowd looks and says, Logush lives. And essentially, just to give you an idea of what that means, Logush is what they refer to the wild god Goldrin as. And if you remember, we did briefly mention Goldrin when we talked about the Worgen, because the Scythe of Elune is actually fashioned from one of his teeth. So basically, the curse of the Worgen comes from his fury. So just to give you an idea of what that even means to them, it is that he is so ferocious and so powerful and unyielding in combat that he's seen basically as the reincarnation of this wild god that died during the War of the Ancients.
How large is he? Are these wild gods big?
Goldrin was actually really sizable. They don't go too much into it, but they do mention that Goldrin was, like, I would say probably about the size of a keeper or something like that, and that he single-handedly killed like thousands and thousands of demons during the War of the Ancients. So he fucks. Thank you for tuning in to Tides of Lore. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow adventurers. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you. That's when they kind of begin chanting, Logush, Logush, and that is where Varian essentially gets his title of the Wolf. After defeating all the challengers at Dire Maul and winning Rhaegar a bunch of money because no one thought that they would be the champions, they are then set to head for Thunderbluff. But before they're set to head for Thunderbluff, Rhaegar is actually approached by a Grim Totem Taran. And this Grim Totem approaches him and says, hey, I'm actually trying to put together an all-female team for my next gladiatorial combat. I will give you 2,000 gold for Valera. And Rhaegar's like, bet, here you go. And this enrages Valera, obviously, because she's like, I just won for you, and you're just throwing me away like that. But it also pisses off Varian and Brawl, who are like, well, we were a team. Like, it feels wrong to split us apart like this. And it kind of begins to set the seeds of, we should probably escape.
Right. I mean, 2,000 gold is like 2 epic mounts.
Exactly, right?
Like, you got to do what you got to do, dude.
Elsewhere, far from Feralis, Katrana hears about from a human that Varian Wrynn is alive, that he is fighting in gladiatorial pits, and that he is, kind of making a name for himself over in Kalimdor. And she is like, oh shit. So she hires an assassin to essentially go kill him, as well as trying to kill anybody that has this information. The guy that comes to her, she's like, here's your money. And then she tells the person standing next to her, yeah, go kill him. His reward's on his body.
Oh, that's smart.
So Katrana now begins to plot to have him killed. And that is where we'll kind of check back in with Valera, who is now in the company of her Grim Totem handler. She is being set to fly by Wyvern to Thunder Bluff as well. But on the way there, she has like an escort that is watching over her and flying the Wyvern from behind. And they just as they're about to reach the edge of like what would be Feralis and stuff like that and give way to the grassy plains of Mulgore, she's like, this is my last chance to escape. Otherwise, there's not really anywhere to hide within Mulgore. So she forces the Wyvern into a barrel roll, which tosses the Taran off of the mount's back as well. And he goes plummeting down below. And then she flies for a bit before diving into the tree line herself to escape any of the other people that might be following her. And she pretty quickly manages to escape. Like she takes this Wyvern, she actually forms a little bond with it, but she manages to escape from her holders. And then she's like, all right, I think I'm going to go and help Brawl and help who she refers to as Logosh, but we know as Varian. And she's like, all right, I'm going to go help them now if I can. So she begins to still make her way for Thunder Bluff because she knows that's where they're going. And that is where we arrive in Thunder Bluff, where we have Varian and Brawl already there. And it is advised by Brawl that he should go to the Pools of Vision within Thunder Bluff, which is this cave along this massive... To give you an idea of what Thunder Bluff is, if you haven't played World of Warcraft, they are built on these massive pillars. It's like these little pocket cities that are just built on these massive pillars, all connected by these super long rope bridges. Looks awesome, but yeah, that is where he is requested to go, into one of these caves that is kind of within one of these spires. And when he does go there, they take his weapons because they're like, yeah, you can go inside because there's no other way out, but you can't have weapons. And he's like, fine. So he goes to these pools of vision, and he kneels down within them to try and regain some of his memories. And he does gain a few of them back. He sees his wife holding his young son, Anduin, and just before he can really get any other information, Brawl's like, wake up, we have a problem. And there is a rock elemental that is trying to crush them. It is later revealed that this rock elemental is actually in here because Magatha Grim Totem, who is the leader of the Grim Totems and a shithead for a very long time, will kind of summoned it into there because she's trying to undo the leadership of the current leader of the Taran, which is Cairn Bloodhoof.
Oh, what a badass.
Honestly, he should have been made war chief over Garrosh.
Yeah.
But as this rock elemental is attacking him, like I said, Varian is just fury incarnate at this point, and he manages to rip one of the stones off of it and pummel the rock elemental to death with its own body.
Who did? Logosh?
Varian, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty badass. I've never heard of this part.
Brawl also does have visions because he's got a lot of trauma from before, so he sees his daughter who died during the Third War and the Battle of Mount Hyjal and stuff like that, as well as like fire and stuff like that. And we get some hints that he also has a lot of trauma from before all of this happened. And still, regardless, Varian pummels this thing to death with its body. And then he comes out of the caves, and the Tauren, having heard about it, they're like, oh, thanks for clearing that out for us. Our leader actually wants to talk to you because, and basically thank you for what you've done. And he's like, okay, we'll go talk with him. So he goes and meets with Cairn Bloodhoof, as well as his I guess not lackey, but his assistant, I would just call him Hamel Runetotem, who is also a druid. And as he meets with Cairn, he basically is just like, yeah, thank you for getting rid of that earth elemental. We didn't know necessarily why it's here, but we were happy to have it gone. And at the very least, I can tell you about where your moniker of Logosh comes from. So this is where he tells him about the ghost wolf and about Goldrin's battles during the War of the Ancients and how he was a ferocious warrior that, you know, seemingly couldn't be stopped until he was. But even after he dies, it is implied that Goldrin still kind of lives on throughout the world in fury. But as they're leaving, Hamel Runetotem basically goes to Brawl, and he's like, here, as a reward for you guys doing what you did, take this. And he hands him a hippogriff feather. And at first I'm like, what is this? I don't understand. But pretty much immediately, Brawl's like, what did you see in that cave? To Varian. And Varian's like, I know I have a family out there, and I am now determined that I can't just sit here and be a gladiator all day because I have to find my family. And he's like, I agree. I think now is the time. So they run across one of these super long rope bridges as their guards are trying to chase after them, and he cuts the ropes, and it goes tumbling down. And that is when Brawl connects with nature through this feather, and a hippogriff comes summoning to them. And they hop on its back, and they take off. And just as they take off, they are being chased by the wyverns of their escort and stuff like that. So they're fighting up there in the air as Varian's like swinging his sword and just chopping dudes out of the sky. And you have Valera basically just as they're escaping show up and see them escaping. She's like, well, fuck. I should probably hide out for a second so that they're not keeping an eye on the skies as much. And she hides near where Magatha's little hut is because a assassin from the Stormwind Assassins Guild comes flying in and speaks with her. And he's like, hey, I'll pay you if you can tell me where the fuck Varian just went. And she's like, I think I have an idea. So they go into her hut and they start doing this little ritual where they can basically scry and watch what they're doing through this fireplace that they're watching. And Valera just kind of overhearing that, like eavesdrops on them, overhears that, yeah, he's planning to kill Varian and that he is obviously a human. So they fly off and they head north towards where they're like, I think I know where a few of our friends will be, Brawl says. So he flies north and they end up in the area of Ashenvale, where they do come across a pretty tense standoff between both the Horde and Alliance. There's a group of Alliance being led by Night Elf Sentinels, and they are also currently kind of walking straight into an ambush that they can't see by the Horde. And the only reason that they don't is because as they're flying overhead, Brawl and them, they look down and they're like, oh shit, I guess we should go tell them. So they fly down to this army of Alliance, and they're like, and they recognize Brawl. They're like, oh shit, you're that druid that left, like 15 years ago at this point. And he's like, yeah, that's me. And Varian's like, you guys
still don't recognize Varian,
and they still don't see. At first I was like, it makes sense because maybe they're just night elves. But then during this battle, you see dwarves, you see stuff like that, and the major one is you see humans. Who the
this doesn't add up.
I agree. I do agree. But it was a long time ago. This came out in 2007. The lore wasn't as crisp as it could have been.
I mean, think of Shadowlands. How crispy was that? I don't know if time has to do with it.
I will say that despite BFA being like not the greatest expansion to play, the media, the cinematics, the trailers and stuff that we get from that.
Yeah, BFA was so good. Like the old soldier video, like there was, and they came out with videos like it seemed like consistently, and it was so fun.
And then they fired the entire lore team, and shit's kind of we'll see.
And stagnant.
Yeah, Well, we'll talk about it as we get there. I personally think that the back half of Dragonflight was genuinely written by AI.
I think next expansion could be cool.
I do like that at the very least. I mean, they brought Chris Meskin back, and now we have a
Void Lord,
full planned out storyline for what we want to do, at least for 3 expansions.
If Azeroth gets consumed in Void, and we get to go to like old places and like it's almost like a Cataclysm, but Void themed, I think that could be cool.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, because obviously the very last expansion in the World Soul Saga is called The Last Titan, which seems to kind of indicate to me that we might actually see Azeroth awaken into the Titan or whatever, right?
I wonder what happens.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that they gave us those little seeds of questioning for that exact purpose, but that is...
WoW 2!
That is quite literally 20 years into the future, so we'll talk about that another time. They land in Ashenvale, and this is actually in Warsong Gulch, which is the battleground that we know of in Ashenvale between the Horde and the Alliance. So Varian actually tells him, he's like, you guys are walking into an ambush, but this is where we see that he doesn't only retain the ability to fight, he also seems to have retained the ability to lead and to strategize. And he starts drawing up in the dirt a plan for everybody. And he's like, you guys can hide in the forest alongside this little area, and I will take a small group of our soldiers, and I will charge forward into their ambush, and then we'll just Yui and see if we can't draw them out, and then we will ambush them. And they're like, that's a lot better plan than we had of fighting in mid without the flag.
Oh, never fight mid, dude. Always fight on flag.
Yep. So he leads this charge, and he rushes. He's like, I'll even lead the charge for you guys. And them seeing this are like, yeah, all right. I mean, if you want to do that, I'm more than happy to have you in the front. So he charges forward with some of these night elves, and they just come running around this corner where they see a bunch of the Horde. And the Horde are like, get him! And even one of the dudes is like, no, it's just a scouting patrol. And they're like, it doesn't matter. They'll tell the Alliance where we're at. We need to kill them. So they all go rushing after them. And they fall right into Varian's trap. So as the Alliance comes rushing down from the hills and the trees around them, they are beginning to get slaughtered. And that is when one of these orc shamans actually summons a lava elemental. And as this lava elemental begins to just crush their forces as well as set fire to all the forests around them and stuff, it infuriates the Druid, Brawl, who has a bit of trauma when it comes to seeing the forest burning, as well as he obviously isn't the biggest fan of the Horde being their captive and stuff like that. So this is the first time you see him actually unleash his ability to summon like the powers of a Druid, to call upon nature itself. The problem is, and we learn about this a little bit later, is that Brawl is kind of completely consumed by rage. And when he starts channeling nature, he can't really control himself. So as he is summoning all these entangling roots that are just dragging the Horde down in, and these lightning bolts that just rain from the sky, and the sky is actually just dumping water onto them now, which along with using some of the powers of the wind, he manages to subdue this lava elemental. But he still is just pumping 100% into his magical abilities, and it starts to grab onto the Alliance forces as well as drag them into the earth and stuff like that. And Varian,
that's kind of badass.
Oh, he's such a cool character, and
they need to give Druid some sort of ability that like does this, because that sounds way cooler than any Druid I've seen.
I think Druids are actually quite possibly the most nerfed class when it comes to the game, because Druids in the lore are just like we even mentioned with the Malfurion episode, one-shotting fucking everything, dealing tons of damage to basically anything that they come across.
Well, there's only a couple Druids that do that. Normal Druid isn't that cool.
Maybe. My first class was a Druid. I got a special place in my heart for them, so.
I hate Druids. I hate them.
Go Night Elf Druids. Remember Teldrassil.
Let it burn.
So after... As he's going on this crazy rampage, Varian sees this and he's like, I have to stop him. So he rushes over and he's like, Brawl, stop. And then Brawl's just completely consumed by summoning the storms and summoning nature. And Varian's just like, all right, man, I don't want to have to do this. And just flonks him over the head unconscious. And that is where you learn a bit about Brawl's past. One of the Night Elf Sentinels approaches him and he's like, yeah, Brawl was like a really promising Druid. He actually, from a young age, started sprouting antlers, which we learn is a sign of Druids having great potential. That's why you'll see Malfurion with antlers, right? But unfortunately, he reached an age where his druidic abilities weren't seeming to really get much better. But that is when the son of Cenarius, the demigod Remulos, approached him and gave him this idol that was supposed to connect him with the Emerald Dream and amplify his abilities. And unfortunately, it was kind of actually his downfall, because during the Battle of Mount Hyjal, during the Third War, where the Legion was going to destroy Nordrassil, the First World Tree, he got into a battle with one of these pit lords by the name of Asgalor. And as he was fighting with Asgalor, he actually drops the idol, and the pit lord smashes it with his Felglaive, and it seemed to destroy it in this portion of the story, but we do learn that it actually just corrupted it with fel energy. And as Brawl was kind of stumbled to the ground seeing this happen, his daughter came rushing over to be like, Dad, I got you, don't worry. And this idol just lets off a massive explosion of fel energy and incinerated her.
Oh gosh.
So that is where you kind of get him becoming traumatized, and where he is so overtaken by grief and fury that actually he loses the ability to summon any of his other druid forms except for his bear form, because the bear form seems to only draw from his anger and his rage. We do also learn back with Valera that the assassin has seen this whole battle go on, and he's like, yep, that's definitely him. All right, I'm gonna go get him. And he flies off on his griffin, and Valera's like, all right, I should follow him. So she follows behind this assassin that's chasing after Varian, and we'll catch back up with them. Brawl, waking up with Varian, he's like, damn, I did it again, didn't I? And he's like, I thought that, after all these years with the gladiators and stuff, that I would have actually been able to control myself, but I see that I never should have come back to you guys, because I'm seemingly always going to be a threat to you. And Varian's like, no, if you hadn't done this, the lava elemental would have decimated us, and it is maybe time for you to learn some balance and restraint. And that is actually when one of these other sentinels is like, oh, also we did learn that the idol that caused all the, started your whole trauma, it's not gone. The Furbolgs actually have it nearby in a place called Bristlefur Hold. And we've noticed that they've gotten really aggressive lately. They say that Furbolgs are actually typically friendly with the other races, but these ones have become super violent. And he's like, yeah, maybe it is time to go see if I can't, collect this idol and purify it or destroy it, right? So that is their next course of action. Him and Varian are like, all right, let's go get this idol. And as they kind of fly off to go get this idol, the griffin with the human assassin lands in the group of the sentinels. He's like, where did this man go? And them being like, well, he's a human, he's friendly. They're like, he went that way. And Valera lands behind them, kind of eavesdropping from the tree line, because she's like, well, I'm a blood elf, they'll hate me. And she is jumped by a bunch of these night elves who are like, a spy! And she literally just says, I am a spy, but I'm not spying on you guys. Fuck off. And,
yeah, sure.
And that's essentially what they're like. Yeah, that's only a child would believe that story. They literally say that. So she goes bolting off through the forest. She manages to meet back up with her wyvern, and they do fly off away from the night elves, as well as she continues to pursue this assassin. And that is where Brawl and Varian make their way to Thistlefur Hold. And as they are flying towards Thistlefur Hold, they are ambushed by this small group of
harpies.
They're ambushed by harpies, and they're forced to land for a second. And that is where the Furbolg actually jump them and the harpies, and it's just this all-out brawl between everybody. And after the harpies are like, we got to get out of here, they fly off. And that's when the Furbolgs ask them, they're like, why are you here? And they're like, oh, we're looking for a little idol, kind of shaped like a dragon, seems to have a little bit of problems with it. And they're like, they're trying to steal our stuff. So they start to attack Varian and Brawl, and they're like, okay, maybe we should still get out of here. So they fight a few of them, they hop on their hippogriff, and they take off once again.
So they didn't get the idol?
Not yet. They also haven't quite reached Thistlefur Hold. So they reach the entrance to Thistlefur Hold, and they're like, I don't see an entrance. And Brawl's just like, it's okay, I'll make one. And he uses his roots of the earth to just rip a hole into this cave system that is Thistlefur Hold. And they go inside. And They're set upon by furbolgs, but they pretty quickly manage to reach the idol, and then he uses these roots once again to kind of seal off the doorway. And he's like, I'm gonna see if I can purify it. Do your best to keep me safe. If the furbolgs break through and I am not, done, just destroy the idol. And he's like, what are you gonna do? And he's like, I'm gonna commune with it. I'm gonna essentially enter the Emerald Dream. And by doing that, hopefully we'll be able to figure it out. As soon as he goes to touch it, it summons a green dragon that is corrupted by Fel. And
oh shit.
The thing about this green dragon is that it seems to be able to shift back and forth between the dream at will, because they'll like throw stuff at it and then it'll phase straight through it, but then it'll swing on them and it will actually crush the rocks or whatever that they're standing next. So there's another reason why Brawl's like, all right, I will
That's terrifying.
Oh yeah. And they're like, all right, I will face the dragon in the Emerald Dream. You face it here. And like I said, if I'm not back and you get outnumbered, just destroy the idol. And he's like, won't that kill you if you're still stuck in the dream? He's like, I don't know. We'll figure it out. And yeah, that's essentially what happens. Brawl slips into a trance going into the Emerald Dream. And as he does, he actually comes face to face with the bear spirit, the only one that he's managed to maintain after losing the idol at Mount Hyjal. And he sees that it is actually the spirit that is still tainted by Fel energy. And the reason why he is seemingly unable to control himself outside of just giving into rage and grief. So as he kind of communes with the idol, he manages to realize his mistake and that he shouldn't be dependent on rage to exist as a druid. If he wants to be a druid, he needs to walk the path of balance. And that is when the other spirits that aren't corrupted come back to him, the stag, the crow, seal, panther. And they kind of help him to battle with this Fel corrupted bear spirit that is still swinging on him and stuff like that. And they do manage to purify this bear spirit. And in doing so, they purify the idol. At which point, the green dragon that was attacking Varian just Thanos snaps out of existence. And that is also as soon as, like, literally, he's like, never can get a break, because as soon as the idol seems to be chilling out, the furbolgs bust through the door. And they're like, kill him! And then just as Varian's like, I guess I'm going to destroy the idol, he runs over to do it. Brawl reappears to him. And he's like, I did it. I got it. Don't worry. And then even after that, the idol is purified, and he tells, and the furbolg that are rushing in are actually like, wait, guys, what are we doing? I don't even know why we're in here.
Their rage is satiated.
Mm-hmm. They are,
because the idol is pure now.
Mm-hmm. So the furbolgs are basically like, if you want that idol, please happily take it away from us, because that shit caused us a lot of problems. So they basically are like, bet, that's exactly why we're here. They take the idol and they leave peacefully from the furbolgs being escorted out of Thistlefur Hold. And that's when they're summoned, because I guess Brawl told people about the idol and about his events. Tells the main night elf force about it. And he is summoned by the current archdruid of the druids in Teldrassil, a man by the name of Fandral Staghelm. And you might be asking, where's Malfurion?
I hate him. I hate Fandral.
And Malfurion, actually, during the events of Classic World of Warcraft, as well as a little bit before, found himself getting stuck in the Emerald Dream and unable to be reawoken. So that is why, that is why Fandral is now the Archdruid leading the Druids, and he is historically a shithead.
I hate him. He's the worst out of the bunch. But you telling me Malfurion is just sleeping in Classic?
It's not entirely sleeping. Like I said, literally he is unable to come back. But
unable to wake up.
Yeah.
So he's sleeping.
I guess so.
The laziest fucking character. And you think of him so highly.
He's the GOAT, man. He's the GOAT.
You and him are similar for how often you sleep. Like today, dude. Okay.
So they go to Teldrassil. They fly on the Hippogriff to Teldrassil. And they are still being pursued by the assassin, who is still being pursued by Valeera. And as they arrive in Teldrassil, Fandral's like, yeah, wow, this is a great idol. This idol of Remulos. I understand that you guys don't intend to stay here. You guys have other plans. He's like, yeah, we got to go find Varian's family. And he's like, well, it would be dangerous if this idol ended up in the wrong hands, so we should hold on to it here in Teldrassil. And he's like, I guess that makes sense. So they leave it with Fandral. And this is actually an artifact that'll come back into play during the Storm Rage books.
I was gonna say, he's just trying to get more power. He seems very corrupt and influential, like very easily influenced.
historically a shithead. In the future, definitely a worse shithead. But for right now, he is just kind of butting heads with the other faction of the people of the Kaldora and Tildrassil, the priestesses. And one of these Night Elf priestesses actually approaches Brawl and Varian as they're making their way to leave. And they're like, Tyrande wants to meet with you. And he's like, okay. So they go and they meet with Tyrande. And Tyrande is just like, yeah, I can sense a super dark magic around you, Varian. Like, something is not only, like, you didn't just lose your memories. Something is subduing them. But I can't unwind it. It seems to be, like, arcane in nature and, you know, not divine. So she's like, but we do actually know of a really powerful mage who will probably be able to help you out. She's over in Theramore by the name of Jaina Proudmoore. So she could probably help you out. That should be your first stop. And they're like, okay, thanks for the info.
Jaina knows who Varian is, correct?
Yes.
So, like, she'll recognize him, maybe? Is he, like, transformed? Like, do people see him as a different person?
No, he looks just like the dude, except he doesn't have the swaggy armor.
So Jaina will have to know who he is then, right?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
Just as they're taking off and leaving Teldrassil, the assassin arrives and talks with the flight master, who's like, have you seen these two people? And he's like, oh, yeah. They just flew for Theramore the other day. Apparently, the Alliance are super helpful just when anyone randomly shows up. Yeah, they went over to Theramore, and he's like, all right, but hops on his griffin, takes off. Valera arrives an hour later. She's like, she overhears this very same flight master talking with his two children, because at this time, Varian's legacy of being Logush, the wolf, who is like this ferocious warrior, has already spread across Kalimdor. And they're like, we heard that Brawl and this champion gladiator is here. Like, are they still here? Can we go see them? And he's like, no, they already flew off to Theramore. So Valera, hearing about this, is like, all right, got my spot. Flies to the Duskwallow Marsh after them. And they fly all night. And as they are, literally, this is just them being on a flight path for the last fucking 6 hours, I swear. They arrive in Duskwallow Marsh, and the assassin is catching up with Brawl and Varian. And just as he's pulling up this crossbow to shoot either their mount or Varian himself, Valera appears from behind him and throws one of her daggers that catches him in the back. He goes to turn around and shoot at her, and she's like, oh yeah, bet. And she literally dives off of her wyvern and grabs him off of his griffin, and they both plummet down into Duskwallow Marsh. I really don't know what her play was, because unless they got due to them getting super lucky is the only reason that they survive. And they land in a massive spider web. And this massive spider web is, well, just one of the massive spiders that you'll find in Duskwallow Marsh. They're just called the Duskwallow, like, crawlers or something like that, right? And they're fighting in this web, and Valera's like, why do you want Varian dead? And he's like, even if I knew the reason why they want him dead, I wouldn't tell you. And she's like, you're useless. So they're fighting. And eventually she breaks free of the web, and he does too. And she kind of stumbles into the mucky waters. And just as he is going to swing on her, she kind of parries his blade. And she's like, well, if you had at least been helpful, I might have warned you about what was coming. He's like, what? And then he turns around and he is munched to death by one of these giant spiders. And she is injured. So when the spider's children begin to try and feed on her, she's like doing her best to fight them off, but she can't quite get them. And that is when she is saved by two humans. And these humans are like, come on, get on our little boat. I can understand that you have a greater purpose in this world than just leaving you here to die. And that is where she kind of sees these two people, and her being a blood elf kind of understands people's arcane ability just kind of by innate sense. And she realizes that one of these humans is actually just overflowing with magical energy. And we would recognize her. She doesn't recognize her, but we recognize her as the former guardian, Aegwynn.
Wait, what?
Yup. Aegwynn's back, baby.
So this does confirm your theory that Aegwynn is alive?
Not quite. Because back when we talked about the Arthas episode, Aegwynn was in Theramore during the events prior to the Wrath of the Lich King. So
this is quite a bit before.
Yeah, this is still classic. So, but yeah. Like I said, with her still being alive after 1,200 years or some crazy shit, I stand on it. Aegwynn will come back into the story. She is still alive. And that is where she kind of takes this injured Valera back to Theramore to go be healed. And Varian and Brawl arrive, and they meet with Jaina Proudmoore. And Jaina's like, yeah, I don't recognize this man at all. But you definitely have some arcane spell that is distorting your memory.
Wouldn't Aegwynn know him? Wait, there's no way Aegwynn doesn't know who this guy is, right? Aegwynn keeps tabs on fucking Stormwind.
She doesn't, but I will say that this is where they do reveal it. So she's like, call for my Chamberlain, her Chamberlain being Aegwynn, and we're gonna do a ritual and see if we can't unravel this. And they take Varian to this like portion of this mage tower, and both Aegwynn and Jaina begin to cast this spell on him. And it they can't quite undo the magical spell that's doing this. Like I mentioned, black dragons are innately very magically powerful. I don't necessarily think they should be more powerful than Aegwynn, but that's just my take. But they do manage to undo a bit of it, and Varian does regain some of these memories, and these memories are also seen by both Jaina and Aegwynn. And he sees Stormwind falling during the first war, where it's all in flames, and he's a young boy standing in the streets as it burns. And he sees him standing on a ship as Anduin Lothar takes him away from his shattered kingdom to Lordaeron. And he feels the joy of watching his first son be born, Anduin. And he also witnesses the terrible moment in his life where Tiffin was struck by the stone and killed during the riot. And it is at this point, thank God, that Jaina says, oh yeah, seeing what we just saw, I have basically no doubt that you are actually the lost king of Stormwind, Varian Wrynn.
Oh, you do kind of look like him.
Holding up a picture, she's like, actually, I think you might be Varian.
The biggest catfish of the century, dude. Holy moly.
So she's like, yeah, you're the lost king of Stormwind, and you need to get back to your people because like shit's going down over there. So that is actually where she's like, I'll get you guys a ship and we'll have you cross over to the Eastern Kingdoms, where you will hopefully be able to decipher what's going on with your memory some more and undo this corruption that's going on within your kingdom. And he's like, thank you, Jaina, I like really appreciate it. And this is also where Aegwynn tells Valera, she's like, don't die. Basically, you have a greater purpose in the world. Like, you have a lot of shitty events coming for yourself, but don't die. You have a higher purpose. And Valera is just kind of like, okay, I guess. It is also actually, before they go to leave for the Eastern Kingdoms, Brawl and Varian are like, we should actually go rescue Valera before we do this, because they don't know that she's been following them this entire time. And that's when she appears to them and she's like, too late, idiots, got myself out. And she, kind of laughs at them. She's like, no thanks to you guys' help. And Brawl, he's super happy to see her. He actually picks her up and gives her a big ass hug, which is a big character building moment, because while they were gladiators, they hated each other. Brawl was still kind of constantly agitated, and she was kind of naive and kind of arrogant. So it was a storm brewing amongst the two of them. And Varian, now knowing who he truly was, tells Brawl about it. And Brawl's just like, yeah, I guess that makes sense considering you have this air of arrogance around you. It makes sense that you're a king. And along with that, they are like, all right, let's head to the Eastern Kingdom. So they hop on a ship and they start heading out of Theramore for the Eastern Kingdoms. And that is where we're actually going to call this episode for now. This is, like I said, going to be our first two-parter where we discuss the events of Varian's story on Kalimdor, and the next episode we're going to discuss his events where he does get back to the Eastern Kingdoms and begins to work to unravel the corruption of Onyxia within his kingdom.
Is he still just one half of the soul?
Yeah, and we're actually going to talk a lot more about that in the next episode, because the other version of Varian will come back too.
Gotcha.
But yeah, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure that you leave us a comment about your favorite portion of Varian's story, whether it's from this story or whether it's from later down the line. We would love to hear about it. And, check out our socials. We're on socials now. But that is all we have for you today. And I hope you guys have a good one. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. Your guys' support truly means the world to us. If you're interested in hearing more, we have our full show on YouTube and Spotify, new episodes dropping every Tuesday. I also want to take this moment to give a special thank you to Fantasy Lo-Fi for providing the music for this episode. You can find them on YouTube at Fantasy Lo-Fi or on Spotify under Bits and Hits. Be sure to show them some love, as their music does truly bring this journey to life. Once again, thank you for joining us on Tides of Lore, and we will see you next week.